Top prosecutors in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office have reportedly refused to retry the Karen Reed case. And we have a special guest joining us today.
If they were refusing it for ethical reasons, they would want to make that known, right? I'm Lainey Law.
And I'm attorney Andrew Myers.
And today we're lucky to have a special guest, Yoli. Welcome back.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Yoli.
So it's been a while since we've had Yoli, so thank you so much for joining us today. And now, could it really be that they're refusing? Could it be that Vanity Fair got it wrong? What's going on here?
Well, you just mentioned Vanity Fair did a 2-part series on the Karen Reed case. I always thought Vanity Fair was a women's fashion magazine. So if you caught me reading it this week, it wasn't for that. It was because there was a 2-part series on the Karen Reed case. The reporter from Vanity Fair actually went to Karen Reed's house and spent 3 whole days with her. She brought her own groceries and they sat around and chatted. And we don't know the extent of all of what they talked about, but for 3 days they talked about the case. Yoli, I found that kind of interesting. Wouldn't attorneys not want their client to spend 3 days with a reporter?
Well, you would think that would be a good idea, but I suspect that her attorneys are confident that she wasn't the one who unalived Mr. O'Keefe. So that's the only thing I can think of, because I probably wouldn't allow it, but they must have information that they think it's okay, because, the first trial. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, when you say it like that, it's almost like the way that you're phrasing it is like she can't incriminate herself because she didn't do it. Like
something like that. Yeah. But I don't know.
I don't know either. There must have been some guideposts that Karen Reed either told the reporter or else in her own mind after talking to her attorneys, Yannetti and Jackson. They probably, gave her some advice and said, you want to talk? It's your choice. You don't have to, but let's develop some guidelines. Anyhow, a lot of it, I heard another commentator this week say that Turtle Boy actually said that for people who haven't been following the Karen Reed case, somewhere else, although you're in California, we're here in New England, and I think people all over the country have heard about this case. Mm-hmm. But it was said that for someone who doesn't know about this case, this is a good entry point because it goes over a lot of material in a way that is presentable and readable. The thing that really stood out to me, this is a direct quote. All of these on this page are just cut and pastes out of Vanity Fair. Meanwhile, according to sources, Michael Morrissey, the district attorney of Norfolk County, top prosecutors have refused to retry Reed's case. So he has taken the unusual step of retaining outside counsel to spearhead the next trial, Hank Brennan, who defended the Whitey Bulger case. So I'm thinking to myself, I find that hard to believe. So I called Mr. Morrissey on the telephone. And of course, I got the press office. They put me over to the press office. And after I spoke to the press office, I sent Morrissey this fax. Michael Morrissey, Esquire, Norfolk County District Attorney, 45 Charlotte Road, Canton, Massachusetts. By fax too, and there's his number. And I'm not doxing him because that's a publicly known fax number that's on his website.
Right.
RE, refusal of Norfolk County prosecutors to retry Commonwealth versus Reed. Dear Mr. Morrissey, as I am certain you know, Vanity Fair magazine this week published a 2-part article on the Commonwealth versus Karen Reed case, which included the following quotation, quote, Morrissey's top prosecutors have refused to retry Reed's case, so he has taken the unusual step of retaining outside counsel to spearhead the next trial, Hank Brennan, who defended Whitey Bulger. As a Massachusetts attorney for the last 30 years and a legal crime podcaster who has covered this case, I found this difficult to understand. So on the above date, I called your office on the telephone to confirm. I was forwarded to your press office. The press office representative stated simply, "We have no comment on the Vanity Fair article." When I persisted, amicably and professionally, I would believe any recording of the conversation would prove, I was simply told to refer back to the September 18th press release. Well, that release of 6 weeks ago announced the hiring of Mr. Brennan. I again stated that I was not interested in the Vanity Fair article as a whole, but that I simply wanted to confirm whether, as reported nationally, your top prosecutors refused to retry Reed's case. I was again told that there would be no comment and referred back to the 6-week-old press release. Objectively speaking, if true, this would appear to be a major development that top prosecutors, whose job it is and who are paid to do so, refuse to do their jobs. The fact that the statement that top prosecutors in the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office refused to try the Karen Reed case a second time was not denied and could leave reasonable minds to believe it may in fact be true. If so, shouldn't the public record reflect the same? I stand ready to hear from you in writing, by email, or other manner you choose. And then I said, and I know this was a stretch, but I said, if you're so inclined and there is a substantive answer, I invite you to join our podcast remotely from your office. We record on Friday afternoons between 1:30 and 3:30. But again, if you prefer, we would stand ready to accept a written explanation. Thank you. So
And there's no response yet, or you probably won't get a response.
Moments before we hit the record button here, Lainey and I checked my email inbox, which also is the inbox for my fax. Nothing at all. So that was,
wow.
Yeah.
So we're left to speculate why the top prosecutors will not pursue the case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, the one thing that I can think of is I think, like, as an attorney, you have an ethical duty not to prosecute somebody if you don't have enough evidence or, to proceed. And it's possible that that's what's happening. But, we don't know. But the fact that they refused is concerning, because we would want to know if that's the reason, because, they don't want to be sued for, they don't want to get in trouble with the state bar for pursuing a case that they don't have evidence for it.
No, of course not. And I have to assume it's true. I will assume it's true because, as a former reporter, I gave them the opportunity. And no, we weren't baiting him to come on to the podcast. I'm sure there are people out there that'll think that he could have written me a brief email. How hard would it have been to send a brief email, "Dear Attorney Myers, I emphatically deny that that's true." They cited sources. This is an unsourced statement. It says right there, meanwhile, according to sources. They don't say who said it.
That's what I was wondering, because wouldn't Vanity Fair be able to be sued for defamation if it wasn't true? Like, they can't just say that he refused to do it if they have no reason to believe that it was him refusing.
They could sue, but you have to remember that defamation case against a media source where you are a public figure requires that you have to prove knowledge of falsehood or reckless disregard for the truth, which is an extremely high standard, a very high standard.
With malice, right?
With malice, absolutely. And
with malice,
so it would be very, 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 very difficult. So could they sue? Yeah, anybody can sue anybody. I could sue you because you have ducks behind you. But no court. No court is going to entertain that one. All right. So I went in search of the top 10 quotes out of the Vanity Fair article. You guys want to help me out by taking them and reading them one by one?
Yeah, I'll start out. So on my final night with her, Reed plays DJ on Spotify and tells us about the temperature-controlled storage unit she's been paying for to house the carpeting torn out from the Alberts home after they sold it last year. She hopes that one day she'll have the money to swap it for blood and DNA. The Olympics are on TV, but nobody's paying attention.
Now, this is crazy that Vanity Fair kind of hide. This is breaking news. This was breaking news, and they kind of hide it on, Spotify and the Olympics, whatever. I mean, this is breaking news that apparently right after Brian Albert sold the home on 23 Fairview, Reed was able to find out that the new owners wanted to rip up the carpets. So she had the carpets ripped up, and it turns out that it would cost $5,000 to test each swab. But if something did happen to John O'Keefe in that house and there is DNA in the house, it would be in that carpet. So shouldn't somebody be going through that, I would think?
I would think so. And she's spending a lot of money on the defense. So you would think that would be something that she would want to spend money on. I don't know why it hasn't been done. Or even the prosecution, if they wanted to disprove the fact that he was ever in the house and there was any, it would have to be blood DNA.
Yeah.
Or some kind, because he could have been in that house. There might be DNA, regular, just touch DNA or whatever, but it would have to be like blood or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. On July 1st, Cannoni read the jury's note out loud, which stated that they were at an impasse. In the very next breath, Cannoni declared a mistrial. It was over like a guillotine dropped, says Jackson, adding that Reed's legal team was given no information before that. Some wondered why her defense team didn't object. The judge has one primary responsibility in the trial, and that is to charge the jury correctly, says Jackson. When the jury comes back and says we're at an impasse, you have an additional responsibility to say, an impasse on what? There's 3 counts here. Within days, Reed's lawyers heard about 5 jurors who were disturbed by the outcome, 4 of whom contacted the defense directly. The jurors stated that the jury had agreed unanimously to acquit Reed on the murder and leaving the scene charges. It was the manslaughter charge that the group was split on. In an interview with Turtle Boy, a 6th juror alleged that 2 jurors wanted to contact Cannoni during deliberations, alerting her that they were unanimous on counts 1 and 3. That juror claimed that the foreman, the only person who can contact the judge and who is selected by the judge, said they needed to be unanimous on all counts. We believed that he knew what he was talking about. The juror told Kearney in an interview, I don't know if it would have changed things if we had asked the question about the consensus on 2 of the counts.
That's really confounding, because it seems to be saying that, the jury went through their deliberations, and in fact, this now 6th juror is saying, yeah, we were unanimous on counts 1 and 3, most notably the second-degree murder charge. The only one that we were hung up on was count 2. And we wanted to let people know, but the foreman, who was hand-selected by Judge Cannoni, said, oh, no, we can't do that. We have to write this note saying that we were hung jury. So it's surprising that this kind of stuff comes out in a women's fashion magazine. Isn't that what Vanity Fair is? I don't know. Isn't that what it is?
I haven't looked at a Vanity Fair magazine, and I don't even know how many years, probably over a decade.
It's like they do have some true crime in there, but it is primarily a woman's fashion magazine, I think.
Well, I've now subscribed, so I'll have to start reading the true crime articles, because they charged me $12 to get a year's subscription to download this. I found it on Google News, but you could only read so much of it before there was a paywall. So I, being the cheapskate that I am, I procrastinated a little bit, but then I gave them my $12. All right. So the wildest moment during an already wild trial involved security video from inside the Canton PD garage. during the crucial time between Reed's SUV arriving and the taillight being found at Fairview. With Massachusetts State Police Sergeant Yuri Buchanan, Proctor's supervisor, on the stand, the Commonwealth played video appearing to show that no one in the station went near the taillight in contention, the right one. The video showed the person Buchanan ID'd as Proctor behind the left taillight, though Reed and her lawyers say they had not seen the video beforehand. They were not shown this, and it hadn't been entered during discovery. But they realized during the testimony in the trial, I remember this day, they realized during the testimony that the spelling of police on the cruiser also parked in the garage was in reverse, meaning that what looked like the right taillight was actually the left. The timestamp was not inverted, which Jackson said means someone had to put that on the inverted, the manipulated, the altered, I say backwards, video on purpose. So someone did that intentionally. During Buchanan's cross-examination, he admitted that the video was inverted, meaning that the person Buchanan previously testified was Proctor had actually been behind the right taillight. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? One of the jurors tells VF, Vanity Fair. That was like, holy moly, they did this on purpose. That wasn't just an accident where they didn't know it was inverted. I couldn't believe that a Massachusetts State Police sergeant was defending this in open court. Buchanan testified that he did not know how the video came to be backwards. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I remember that he answered very quickly when Jackson asked him about that. The video was inverted, right? Yes. He didn't even blink.
Unbelievable. Elsewhere in the Vanity Fair article, Elizabeth Little, the other attorney from California who came out to Boston to help defend Karen Reed, said that they had a hard time even getting videos in JPEGs out of the state. She said that they didn't have the metadata, Lainey, that's behind it all? Mm-hmm. She said that the metadata was not behind these pictures, and they were not in full resolution. So they were not provided the full JPEGs or the videos in full before the trial. So this was an ambush. Mm-hmm. This was an ambush. It was wrong. Very few people would be able to get away with a trick like this, but I don't know.
Crazy.
About 10 months after O'Keefe's death, the Office of the U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts impaneled a federal grand jury as part of an investigation into an unspecified federal crime related to Norfolk County's handling of the Reed case. The impetus is unknown. Levy will not comment on the active investigations, and nearly 2 years into the probe, his team has not yet reached a conclusion. When FBI steps in, that's usually an indication that they are in possession of some information that is extremely damaging to the law enforcement agencies involved.
Yeah, Levy, that refers to Jonathan Levy, the U.S. attorney in Massachusetts, and he was the person who spoke when Sandra Birchmore's alleged attacker, Matthew Farwell, was indicted, even though the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office walked away from that and said, no. And Levy and the U.S. Attorney's Office went in and did an indictment. We're all waiting for the other shoe to drop because, as indicated after this quote in Vanity Fair, they are actively looking into the Karen Reed case, and just the fact that they haven't done anything yet doesn't mean that they're not going to. Yoli, the next quote is about, do you remember that? Do you remember the famous text by Jennifer McCabe, Haas long to die in the snow? Remember that?
Yeah.
Vanity Fair hired their own expert.
The prosecution's expert said the 2:27 a.m. timestamp is not indicative of the time of the search, claiming that McCabe could have searched in a window opened at 2:27 a.m. Vanity Fair asked Umit Karabavic, a PhD at Purdue's Department of Computer and Information Technology, who specializes in iPhone artifacts and limitations of digital forensics, to evaluate the prosecution's expert testimony, as well as an affidavit from Reed's expert. Based on my research and expertise, I concur with what I see in the affidavit from Richard Green. Kara Bivik emailed Vanity Fair referring to Reed's expert. Though the browser tab was opened earlier than the searches, Kara Bivik said, the timestamp for the search items is recorded for searches and stored in the database, not the time of the tab opening. He noted that Green additionally verified the search times with associated WAL files that are occasionally overlooked.
So Vanity Fair hired their own independent expert, didn't owe anybody anything, and he confirmed that those searches by Jennifer McCabe were in fact made in the middle of the night at 2:27, and not, as the prosecution had claimed, at 6:30 in the morning when Karen Reed and the others found John O'Keefe's body. So I found that really very interesting.
And I'm not familiar or wasn't familiar with WAL files, and I just looked it up, and it's interesting that he mentioned that, because from Google it's saying a family of techniques providing autonomously and durability in database systems, and what is WAL and SQL, and it's like they use WAL ahead logging algorithm, which guarantees that no data modifications are written to a disk. Basically, it's just talking about how the information is stored and basically the history of the information. So I thought the fact that they mentioned that specifically was an interesting indication of whether or not they know what they're talking about.
Good catch. Good catch.
Yeah. So they do know what they're talking about.
It sounds like they were talking about something. I didn't, and I'm taking database systems right now. I didn't know what a WAL was. I just looked it up, but it sounds like he is talking about something that he has knowledge on. It's logically what he's talking about. It's like, okay, this makes sense. Usually things have like log information.
Yeah.
The Vanity Fair article, again, the reporter spent 3 days living with Karen Reed in her house in Massachusetts, and I just thought it was really interesting. Then in the quote we're looking at now, they go into the fact that her life just went to pieces after this. But the really big thing that I saw in this quote was, we talked about maybe instead of trying the case again, maybe the Commonwealth would try to get her to plea. No, I'm not backing down now, Reed told Vanity Fair. As scary as a potential conviction is, I'll go to jail for something I didn't do before I plea out. I will never give them that win. So I think we've said all of that before, but that's the first time I've ever actually seen that in writing.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, I mean, I think this kind of reflects what we've been talking about in the past, where she's really fighting for this and doesn't, we've gotten to escalated to this point.
Yeah.
Now they go into a lot of, for those who just read about the trial and read about it in the newspaper and podcasters, Vanity Fair gave a big background as to, how the relationship started. I don't know, Lainey, do you want to pick it up here in the beginning?
In the beginning. Hey, Blast from the past. How's things? That was the Facebook message Reed received from O'Keefe in the spring of 2020. The pandemic was first taking hold, schools were shutting down, and Reed hadn't seen O'Keefe in 16 years. They'd first met at a birthday party for O'Keefe's sister, Kristen, in Boston in 2004. Reed didn't know Kristen. She was just tagging along with a friend from Braintree, where the O'Keefes grew up. She thought O'Keefe was cute. They exchanged numbers and dated for a few months, a fleeting 20-something romance. In the intervening decade and a half, Reed and O'Keefe both experienced harrowing personal traumas. Reed endured 10 surgeries in 18 months to treat an ultimately diagnosed Crohn's disease. Less than a year after her last major surgery, she was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. O'Keefe, meanwhile, had lost Kristen to brain cancer in 2013, and shortly after, his brother-in-law, Kristen's husband, from a heart attack. O'Keefe, known simply as JJ to his niece Kaylee and nephew Patrick, became their guardian. Reed thought that surviving these life-altering events helped her forge a deep bond with O'Keefe. She fell for him and the kids. I feel like this is a perfect situation, says Reed. It's a Karen-sized hole in this house that I have the energy and resources to fill. The relationship progressed quickly in the confines of the pandemic. Reed, who could work remotely, rearranged her schedule to be at O'Keefe's house most days, supervising the children's Zoom schooling and making them lunch, while O'Keefe worked a desk job in the SO Fender Registry, the information unit at the A1 station in downtown Boston.
As in any relationship, issues bubbled up. O'Keefe resented that Reed got to do the fun parts of the parenting while he played disciplinarian. She says, when the kids returned from a trip with their grandparents, Reed recalls that Kaylee and Patrick walked past O'Keefe to hug her first. O'Keefe felt the kids preferred Reed because she spoiled them with go-karts, fancy haircuts, and shopping trips. She thought they could feel her warmth and O'Keefe's stress. He never adequately mourned his sister, according to Reed, and struggled to manage his own grief plus the children's increasingly complicated needs, emotional and otherwise. O'Keefe saw a therapist with them at one point, but when the shrink introduced board games, O'Keefe checked out. I think that's part of his stock, Reed contemplates now. The Irish Catholic south of Boston, rub some dirt on it, drink through your problems mindset.
Wow. Just drinking increased for both of them on weekends, which she now regrets, but rationalized at the time as them unwinding after a hard week. Once O'Keefe had a drink or two, that was when he was the most relaxed, says Reed. He would be easygoing, but then it was his vicious cycle that he's hung over the next day. During a New Year's group vacation in Aruba, Reed says, O'Keefe and his friends cracked beers at 10 a.m. and drank till sundown or man down, whichever came first. She says she caught O'Keefe kissing another woman. The woman denied it at trial. Remember the Sullivan sisters? That's who they're talking about there. That same January, Reed engaged in her own flirtation. She exchanged texts with one of O'Keefe's contacts, Brian Higgins, an ATF agent. It was a brief thing and petered out as not a good choice of words. It was a brief thing and petered out as quickly as it started. I knew Higgins found me attractive, she says. It helped me emotionally validate myself, which is embarrassing to admit. And then it continues. That kind of gave some context as to the night we're talking about.
On Friday night, January 28th, 2022, Reed and O'Keefe had been drinking with O'Keefe's buddies at the Waterfall in Canton, the kind of bar where flat-screen TVs are perma-tuned to sports and friends trade shots. Canton is a quaint cop town 15 miles southwest of Boston, just past the skirt of suburbs that are untouchable even under seven fingers, where the state's major highways intersect, making it a prime blue-collar community where homes are passed down over generations. It was about midnight, and snow had just begun falling when Brian Albert invited everyone in the group to his house afterwards for drinks. The former Marine and 30-year BPD veteran headed the fugitive apprehension team and had appeared on the Donnie Wahlberg produced reality show Boston's Finest. As one of 7 siblings raised in towns, he seemed to know or be related to everyone. His younger brother Kevin is a Canton cop, and another younger brother Chris is a town select board member. That night, Reed and O'Keefe were joined by a cluster of veteran cops' family members, his wife, Nicole, his brother Chris, Chris's wife, Julie, Nicole's sister, Jennifer McCabe, and McCabe's husband, Matt, plus Higgins and an unrelated couple, Karina and Nicholas Kolokithis.
Yeah, and the next is history, and they get into it a little bit. They talk about what happened that night. And, I'm surprised that Reed, went into this amount of detail. I'm really surprised that her attorneys allowed her, or, it's a lengthy article. I encourage people to take a look at it. We're not trying to sell Vanity Fairs, but it's an interesting article. And again, as others have said, not me, others have said that this is a good entry point if you're interested in the Karen Reed case and you haven't followed it other than just hearing little clips here and there. I found this paragraph in the article just really telling. An attractive, highly educated finance professional accused of killing her cop boyfriend and leaving his body on another cop's lawn was catnip to Boston media. The morning after her arrest, cameras rolled as she was escorted in handcuffs to her arraignment. She pleaded not guilty to all charges and was released on $50,000 bail. A cousin with a criminal record called her with advice. I've pled to charges where I wasn't even in the state where the crime happened. I wanted to get out of jail. I couldn't post bail, and I didn't have David Yannetti. The cousin warned her that prosecutors don't always care if they have the right guy as long as they have someone behind bars. That's a closed file for them, he said, then added, question everything. So, you know what really strikes me about this is that the article obviously was very deferential to Karen. The reporter must have, you don't spend 3 days in somebody's house, sharing groceries and watching TV and that kind of thing without bonding with them. As I pointed out in the beginning, I gave the district attorney the full opportunity to participate with us, to just even send us an email, send us a letter, send us a fax. So, and I'm renewing that right now. If the district attorney wants to appoint someone to talk to us about this article and respond to us about specific things that they find fault with, we're here. You have our fax number. You have our email. I can be found. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I can be found.
The commenters are always finding Andrew. Every day I come in and Andrew's like, I got this email. I'm like, oh my God.
This is a great quote. Who wants to take this? Who wants to take this? Is really an interesting thing that I'll have a comment about.
I can take over. Yuri received a different kind of call on February 2nd, within hours of Reed's arraignment. A man with a grave voice claiming to have a background in Boston law enforcement made an explosive claim. He told Yannetti that Brian Albert and his nephew had beaten up O'Keefe on January 29th. When O'Keefe didn't come to, said this mysterious man, Albert and an unnamed federal agent put O'Keefe's body on the front lawn. When Yannetti called back for a more thorough interview, he backtracked, saying he was only speculating based on photos of O'Keefe in the news, and he ultimately recanted the tip altogether. But Yannetti points out that photos of O'Keefe hadn't been released at the time of the first call, and that other details from the tip lined up. Higgins, the ATF agent, had been drinking at the Albert home until that morning, as had Albert's nephew, Colin. Until the tips are called, Reed and Yannetti hadn't known that Colin was at the house, as he later testified he was because his name was not in the police reports.
Interesting quote, and I remember a lot being made of that earlier on in this case. That apparently. That was a house where people went and people fought, and they had little fights in the basement. And I remember that. And then it was recanted, and a lot was made of it. And that mystery call was never brought in because it is hearsay. It is something that was apparently done and then recanted. Initially, the charges against Karen Reed were just associated with, leaving the scene of a drunk driving accident. But then they were ratcheted up, and Karen Reed called Attorney Jackson out in your neck of the woods, Yoli. So why don't you take this one?
Okay. Jackson gets more than 100 representation requests monthly, but the subject line of Reed's email stood out. Murder of a Boston cop. He clicked on it and read her plea. I am fighting for my life against a blue wall, and therefore marshaling whatever resources, advice I can find. On a call with Reed, Jackson agreed to share his cell phone data-related motions and asked to hear more about her case. After learning that she was being accused of fatally hitting O'Keefe with her SUV, the lawyer asked to see photos of O'Keefe's injuries. Reed immediately sent over a few, revealing O'Keefe's bruised and swollen eyes and the cuts above his right eye and nose. But it was O'Keefe's right arm, which looked like it had been clawed, that caused Jackson to exclaim, That's an animal attack. Jackson later said by phone, if there's any medical examiner or DA or lead investigator out there claiming that's from a car, that's bull. And if that's not true, what else isn't true?
Yeah, we tried to clean some of this up for our friends over at YouTube, because we have had problems before. And, the stuff that Proctor said on the stand, that's all in the article. We've kind of skipped over that because how many episodes have we done where we went into that? So
yeah,
the last quote that I pulled, and there's a lot more to the article. We'd be here for hours. Yeah. There was a lengthy quote about Chloe the dog. Chloe the dog had some issues in the past. Chloe the dog, a woman had been walking her something doodle. What do they call those? Labradoodle. A woman had been walking one of her dogs, and Chloe came out and attacked the dog. There was another incident where Chloe had the Brian Albert's family dog had caused problems, and when that person called the Canton Police Department, she was told, well, she would have to talk to the animal control officer. Well, the animal control officer wasn't in. And then it was said that they didn't know when the animal control officer would be in. And then remember, Kevin Albert, brother of Brian Albert, works for the Canton Police Department. Then a phone call was made to this person that was trying to make a complaint about Chloe. And according to the Vanity Fair article, the Canton Police Department person that called this complainant said, what can we do to make this go away? So,
wow.
And as we all know, Chloe the dog was rehomed right after this happened. And Brian Albert, who owned the house at 34 Fairview, and that house had been in the family for years and years and years, that house was sold shortly thereafter. So those are the quotes that I pulled out of the Vanity Fair. I don't know, impressions, people? Impressions? What do you think of this whole article?
It's a lot of things to write if you don't think that it's going to be accurate. I think that it's crazy that such a large publication would post something so contested and so confidently. Like, I know you said that the fact of them getting sued is very unlikely, but it's still a very bold choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there have to be publishers out there that publish this kind of stuff, because before the newspapers all started going down, and by the way, there was an item in the news yesterday that most of the newspapers in New Jersey are going to either stop printing or completely go out of business within early in the next year. So before the newspapers went down, they did used to publish stuff like this, and magazines used to publish great stuff. You'd grab a magazine and you'd sit there for hours reading it, but they really don't anymore. They've become too complacent. They've become too just like, puffy. So yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, the only thing the things that I take away from that article is the one thing about the prosecutors refusing to re-prosecute the case. Why would they be refusing? And the other question is the toll that it's taken on Karen Reed to defend herself. And imagine if she had had public defenders, would her defense still be the same? I mean, it's sort of, one of these things that makes you think that something like this could happen to anybody. If she is innocent, which based on the evidence, I mean, I'm looking at it based on the evidence. Does it rise to the level of the crimes that they say she committed? And it doesn't seem like it does.
No, it really didn't. In the trial itself, their own expert, Joseph Paul, testified that what he saw was consistent with a side swipe. Now, this is the guy they put on the stand to confirm, that a rear end accident happened, and then, to a reasonable degree of certainty, beyond all reasonable doubt, I should say, it happened the way they said. Well, their own expert failed. Not only did he not say it was a rear end accident where the light struck John O'Keefe, he said it was consistent with not a rear end, but a side swipe, and consistent with is far below the standard of beyond a reasonable doubt. So, I don't know. I wouldn't want to. I never worked as a prosecutor, but I wouldn't want to prosecute the case without the evidence. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. you know, I mean, I as a Massachusetts attorney, I really don't want to speak badly about another Massachusetts attorney, but Alan Lally might be a really nice man. He might be an intellect. He might be somebody you want to talk to, but the trial skills, you know, it's
No, it's hard, and you know, I don't know. I hope this case gets resolved, and I hope that justice is had. And if the state can't prove their case, they can't prove their case.
No, and Yoli, I know you've been really busy on other stuff. Since we talked to you about this case the last time, the Commonwealth has actually hired some new experts, including an accident reconstructionist and another forensic expert. Plus, they've named a new expert to do video. We don't know whether it's video reconstruction or putting together, but one of their new experts is a video expert who works for the police department. But so they're gearing themselves up with new experts, you know, anticipating that when they do retry the case in late January, that, you know, they'll have new experts. But the facts are the facts. So I don't know. I really don't.
And, you know, in terms of what the prior experts said, are they able to introduce that into the trial?
Of course, why not? I mean, if they have a new expert that comes in and says, "Oh yeah, it was a rear end accident and that taillight smashed into John O'Keefe and that's what killed him," you know, I don't see why the defense wouldn't be able to recall Joseph Paul and said, "Well, you work for the Massachusetts State Police, don't you? You read the police report, didn't you? You examined all the evidence, didn't you? And you said that the accident was consistent with the side swipe. Didn't you?"
Yeah.
Why can't they do that?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just didn't know what the rules are, but it seems like that's what they should do. I mean, they can't. I mean, they're using this mistrial as a way to prepare themselves and fill in the blanks that they left in the first trial. And for some reason, that doesn't seem fair. But I suppose they can do that.
It's a little silly. I mean, at the end of the day, it took the jury so long to deliberate, and they couldn't come to a conclusion. They couldn't come to a conclusion. They couldn't come to a conclusion. There's a reason they didn't come to the conclusion of guilty. It's not like more evidence is going to magically appear. Anything's going to magically change. And I think that's what makes it so damning that Vanity Fair is saying that he's refusing to try it. And I think it would make sense, like you said, ethically to refuse to try it, because nothing's going to change. You're taking so much time and resources when the jury couldn't even come with this conclusion in the first place for beyond the reasonable doubt guilt. And I think that leaving the scene of the crime is one thing, you know, but to say that this was all intentional, I don't really think that you can ever improve that somebody intentionally did something like this. Even like had she had any part in this, the chances of it being just an accident would have been significantly higher and a lot easier to convince a jury. But if it comes to the jury deciding that this Aruba trip just filled her with such rage that months later she's hitting people, you know,
it makes no sense. Now, Yoli, you were with us a lot earlier this year. You took some time away from us, and part of the reason was, I know you're busy in your practice, but you've started your own channel. Tell us, I don't want you to spill the beans. We don't want to take your thunder away, but tell us what you're working on or what you have been working on your new channel.
Well, I've primarily been focusing on Koberger on the Idaho 4, but I did do a few videos on Micah Miller.
Oh, yeah.
She's the pastor's wife who allegedly committed suicide. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on the Micah Miller case right now. There's an FBI raiding, I think, the pastor's home, or I don't know the details, but I'll find out because the FBI is now involved in this investigation. I'm not sure if they're investigating Micah Miller's death or if they're investigating the finances of the church or whatnot. But apparently there's some drama going on right this very minute in the Micah Miller case. So I did a couple of videos on Micah Miller about the law, Micah's Law, which involves coercive control and as a form of abuse, domestic violence. And California has a law like that, but it's not criminalized. It allows people who are victims of this coercive control, which is a very specific type of abuse, to get restraining orders and other protections. Now, in South Carolina, they're trying to make it criminalized. They're trying to make that coercive control they can be charged criminally for that, whoever's doing the coercive control. It hasn't passed yet, but one of the issues is proving that, because you have somebody who's a victim of coercive control. They're being controlled, their money's being controlled, everything's being controlled, and they have to go to court and prove the coercive control. That's the issue.
Wow.
And that's very hard to prove, especially when the abuser is controlling everything. So it's a conundrum that they're trying to work out in South Carolina. And then I also did that one, and I'm going to do another video on Nikki McCain, because that's similar. She was up north in California. She went missing 2 weeks before she was to testify against her husband for domestic abuse. And she went missing. They still haven't found her. And she's part of the tribe, tribal, So there's also issues with the tribe and how the members of the tribe are helping or hurting. There's issues. I don't know if they're helping or hurting or what, but there's issues with the tribal land and searching and suspicious fires in the property of the husband. So, these are all, they're kind of like, it is similar to Micah Miller's case in a sense that, Micah Miller probably had some information on the pastor. They were getting divorced. She was probably going to spill the beans. And this is what happens. But, this is speculation. It's not fact, but this is what certain people think.
Well, all right. We'll put a link down in our description below. We'll put a link into your channel so that people can. I don't want you to spill the beans on all your channels. We want to send people over, and we thank people. We thank you for giving us all this time today on the Karen Reed case when you've been so busy, both with your own practice, but also with the things you're talking about. So, thanks for your time. Thanks for letting us know, Lainey. Any closing thoughts?
No, the whole thing is just sad to see in Massachusetts. Obviously, we want things to be done right the first time. And if he's straight up refusing, that could be a sign of a red flag. But I am really glad that we got to have you on, Yoli. It's been so long.
I know, it's been a while.
Or it feels like so long. It's been about a month, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. All the best. Take care. Whether you are in the grocery store, the gas station, or anywhere else, please remember to be kind to people. You don't know what they're going through. And the same goes for our comments section. We want you to comment, but be nice, be kind, be positive if you can. And thank you for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Have a good one.